I've asked my colleague, Rose Brandolino, to join me, and we're going to split the talk because each of us has been working on some related projects, but from slightly different points of view. My view on blockchain, based upon this morning's session that I was in, is rather heretical, which is I really don't care about the technology. I'm trying to solve some business problems. And I don't care which flavor of blockchain gets used. What I do care about is being able to address the problem that people in a business ecosystem don't trust each other, and they don't trust the data that each other has. And that maybe with blockchain we can get some data transparency that parties in a transaction, multiple parties in the same transaction will actually be able to have a common view of data, be able to look at that data and says, hey, we trust it and it's the truth, and let's go do something in our business because of it. So, IBM has a research arm called the Institute of Business Value. They did a study earlier this year, and a couple of things came out of it in the executive summary. One is that blockchain can deliver a new system of accountability for consumers. A new supply chain emerges that is more information driven, and there's a way to reinvent the consumer experience. And when I say reinvent the consumer experience, it's actually being able to deliver something that the consumers say they want that no one's been able to actually give them. So basically, most of the consumer organizations have been slow to start. There are a bunch of first movers. What we've seen inside of IBM echoes what we heard earlier, which is basically 90% of the projects never make it past the technology proof of concept. And out of the other 10%, 90% of those, so 9 out of 10 of them, never actually make it out of a pilot. And when we look at why they fail primarily because of business reasons. They don't fail because of technology. So we identified in our study frictions that come into play where blockchain can help remove frictions. One was imperfect information and inaccessible information. And depending upon where you look in retail, you see a lot of that in the retail supply chain. The second one was interaction, transaction costs, degrees of separation, inaccessible marketplaces. For me, how many times in visiting farmers did I hear, I'd really like to know what the consumer thinks of my watermelon, but my distributor and the retailer will never tell me. And how many times do you hear from a consumer, I'd really like to know where the stuff was grown? And how many times do you hear from a retailer, I'd really like to understand why the consumer would buy more of my stuff versus watermelons in my store versus watermelons in some other store. What's driving that decision purchase? And that information is there if they would share that information, and to share it, they need to trust each other. The other thing is innovation. And in retail, for the most part, it is really institutional inertia that is stifling innovation. Most of our clients don't understand that this concept of fail fast and fail often. Instead, they're still in the mode of, I'm going to put 2 bets down and one of them better be a blockbuster, otherwise we're going out of business. They don't really understand the whole concept of how to do innovation. So supply chain develops, and with this, I'm going to turn this section over to Rose.
people were in this morning's blockchain session? Oh, good number. Okay. Okay, good. We're going to talk a lot more about, because to us, basically, blockchain, it's a foundational technology, right? But it's all about the business problems that you're solving with the technology, right? And what are the entities going to get out of the data, essentially, that's being stored within the blockchain. So specifically with supply chain, it's one of the more exciting areas that I see at IBM in working with customers where blockchain can be used as that foundational technology. There's been, supply chain's been riddled, I guess, with issues, right, for decades. Lack of visibility, right, as Dennis mentioned, lack of trust with entities within supply chain. And blockchain can help to overcome some of those issues. Many of you were probably around back in the 80s when, with the advent of EDI, right? And EDI was supposed to be poised, right, to solve some of those issues, but here we are 30 plus years later, and we still have the same issues. But, you know, we really think that blockchain can be that foundation to help solve some of those issues. And it really, how they will be solved is by optimizing processes and solving business problems, which ultimately lead to, right, increased revenues, saving time, saving money for companies. The last point that's up there about new business models, that's something to definitely keep in mind, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So I'll just paint a picture to help kind of explain just a very basic scenario of how blockchain could be used within supply chain and retail. So imagine a distributor is carrying cases of fresh fish, and they are able to, in near real time, recall those cases of fresh fish because data derived from the blockchain was able to detect that was derived from temperature sensors, let's say, that were detecting the temperature en route from the distributor to the store, that the temperature had went outside of an acceptable range for an unacceptable period of time. And then imagine that the actual store or customer of that distributor is able to, with the distributor in near real time, settle that arrangement, whatever contractual arrangement they have in that situation. When that happens, in near real time, they can settle that. Then imagine that distributor actually is the one who took the initiative and built the solution, kind of corralled all of their supply chain partners into a group that where they were able to prove value by using blockchain as a foundational technology, and they created a new business model around that. So, and they're monetizing it in some way. Maybe they're selling it to their supply chain partners. Maybe they're able to duplicate what they've built for other companies that are, or other supply chains that are in similar situations. So those are the kind of opportunities. That's actually a real life scenario. It's not fresh fish, but it's something else. But it's actually, those are real opportunities that can be derived by members of retail supply chains by using blockchain as a foundation. Now take that scenario and actually add the ability for that customer's bank, let's say, which is on a separate blockchain network, to be able to pay that distributor in near real time as well. So in that situation, we have two different blockchain networks actually having the ability to communicate with one another. And that's kind of the next phase of where we're going with blockchain, is the ability for blockchains to interoperate with one another. So it's kind of the network effect, right? You know, start small, think big is kind of the mantra. Bring together the members of your supply chain, figure out what the business problem or problems, you know, you don't want to tackle too many even to start. 2 or 3 is sufficient. Make them impactful enough and valuable enough for those around you. And once you prove that, then you're going to see many more members of your supply chain want and need to participate, because you'll be able to articulate the value even more. And then you'll be able to tag on additional use cases or problems that you're going to solve, because they're going to continuously keep surfacing as you're solving some of the other problems. And you're learning as you're going, basically. So that's kind of the network effect of how we see blockchain evolving over time. And then you've got these networks, and then networks start to communicate with networks, and before you know it, you've got a big network effect of problems that are being solved, and a lot of revenue that's being generated, and a lot of money that's being saved. Another new business model example I'll give you, it reminded me when the last gentleman brought up the application Embark with the pet DNA. So imagine being a pet store, like a retailer in pet products, and becoming the developer of a solution or a platform with blockchain as the foundation, of a digital pet identity, where not just the DNA, but also all of your pet records, health records, boarding records, anything could be compiled as part of blockchain from various entities in order to create this digital pet identity. There's opportunity for things like that. So it's really just thinking, outside the box on what could be accomplished, knowing what the foundation blockchain can achieve for you. So this is kind of an eye chart. It's actually a couple reference architectures. And I think the main thing that I want to articulate here is, if you kind of see the fuchsia color in the middle of both of these reference architectures, those are the blockchain components, basically, that are necessary in any blockchain architecture. And those pretty much stay constant. I mean, the names may change a little bit, or the capabilities may change a little bit, depending on the foundation of the actual blockchain solution that you're using. But they're pretty constant. What's really important, though, in my opinion, is everything else that's surrounding that, right? So how are you exposing that data? What are the applications that you're building that are going to create the visualizations and or the intelligence for the problems that you're solving? How are you exposing that information to the various entities that either supply information to the blockchain and or can derive information from the blockchain? What kind of event management do you have? Like, are you interfacing with existing systems of records, ERP systems, things like that? How are you handling that? How are you notifying maybe or creating action when you see certain things happening, similar to that temperature excursion that I described earlier? How can you automate those functions? So there's many use cases that we've been working on at IBM, actually. It's actually a really exciting time for blockchain and use cases. So some of these, I'm going to talk more about food safety in a second. We actually have an example video, just a quick one to show, so that you can kind of get a visual of what a blockchain application actually looks like. So what do the users of the blockchain actually look at and have the ability to see? Supply chain visibility, I mean, that's a big one. I don't think I talked to any customer about supply chain without them telling me that they have problems with visibility in their supply chain. So there's many ways to tackle, and achieve visibility by using blockchain as a foundation with supply chain. The workflow one, that one was a specific one to container shipping. And some of the problems that were solved there were really impactful. A lot of paper processes, so we digitized paper forms and allowed blockchain transactions to confirm the fact that they were completed, but the actual digitized forms themselves were stored off-chain. So there's ways to accomplish things like that. Like, everything doesn't have to necessarily go on the blockchain. You can actually optimize processes by using multiple technologies in order to get real value out of that. Provenance, that's another one. Here it mentions manufacturing, but in retail, I think more about counterfeit, actually, right? So think about, expensive luxury handbags or any luxury items for that matter, or even, I talked to one of the brand name sneaker manufacturers, actually, and they have a huge problem. I mean, in the millions of dollars lost in counterfeit product. And, how interesting would that be to be able to trace even a lower cost item throughout the supply chain and actually verify its provenance, right? And there's other research projects going on at IBM that actually, where we're creating things called crypto anchors. So less than 10 cents each, let's say, provide the ability to be able to track an item like that from manufacturing all the way through to sale. So a low-cost option to be able to finally get there. Okay, so with that. So food trust, this is near and dear to Dennis's heart, actually. He's actively involved in this. And the whole problem, this was a partnership that started with Walmart that has now evolved into actually a whole solution that IBM has built to help tackle food safety called IBM Food Trust. So think of blockchain as the foundation, but IBM, we've actually built the application on top of that, and we're selling it as a complete solution to customers now. And the problem that Walmart had initially was tracking, in this case, mangoes, back to the farm. And it initially took them 6 days, you see it here, 18 hours and 26 minutes, just to track it back to the farm via, a multitude of manual processes, some automation, but, a lot of different processes. Now, with this solution that we partnered on, they can do it in 2.2 seconds. And it's expanded way beyond mangoes, obviously, into Walmart actually publicly announcing that they're making it mandatory for certain suppliers to participate in the solution. So green leafy vegetables are next, and some others are coming on board as well. So back to that network effect, right? So now, I'm hoping this is going to work, because this is our example, so you can see what the typical retailer and or supplier and or any member of the IBM Food Trust network actually interfaces with. Click again, it'll play it. Okay.
In this demo, we will use the food safety solution powered by blockchain to trace mangoes, and we can compare the time from our solution to the traditional system where tracing could take days. First, I enter the lot number from a box of mango and hit trace. Walmart food safety team has done the same exercise, and it took them 6 days, 18 hours, and 26 minutes to find the farm level details for this box of mangoes. With our solution, the traceback time was only 12 seconds. This lot number consists of Tommy variety of mangoes that was sourced from 2 ranches in Mexico and harvested on April 24th. If you'd like to see the map location, you can click on the map icon and view the farm locations on the map. In the old system, even after 7 days, we only had the farm level details. Here, we have a holistic view through the supply chain with the ability to get granular data at any point. For any of these 6 entities, here we can drill down our details. For example, we can provide the food safety audit certificate for Country Fresh. This solution provides a first of its kind, immutable, trusted ledger for capturing traceability information. With this solution, we remove friction in the supply chain, improve efficiency, and speed access to trusted information for all permissioned food system participants, from grower to our customers. This ultimately builds transparency and trust across the entire value chain, resulting in saved money for us and our suppliers, and better delivery of our customer promise to save money and live better.
Okay. So that's why we build blockchains, basically, is to provide solutions like that.
Okay, so what I'd like to talk a little bit about is, you saw the supply chain side, and to give you some idea today, with one of the major, the Food Trust, it started out as a consortium. It is a private blockchain, it's not public. It has 20 some odd participants in it who are essentially the trust anchors, so the people who provide, you could call it, essentially act as proxies for the suppliers. So they're the ones who say, okay, here are my suppliers that I've identified that I would like to be on Food Trust. And you can trust other members of the consortium, you can trust that they're good because I am vouching for them as a business. They are a proven supplier to me. So that's the business validation. There is still, the entire idea of consensus on the blockchain, validating transactions and all of that. But there's a business component of, if I'm bringing a supplier on board and I'm saying I trust them, does my competitor who's also in this blockchain solution, do they agree that I can act to vouch for this other party? And that's part of the governance mechanism that exists in Food Trust. So today we have around 50 some odd, one of the retailers has around 50 some odd SKUs in the supply chain that are going through Food Trust. They are primarily in produce in the case of this one supplier, one retailer, and they're going to all their stores. So it is tracking it from point of harvest, when the stuff gets loaded on a truck to go to the distribution center. So it is lot-based, not item-based, but it's lot-based. So if we're talking about strawberries, it's at the clamshell level. It's not a barcode on every individual strawberry. It's at the clamshell level. If you're talking about cabbage, it's at a carton of cabbage, which happens to have 8 heads of cabbage in it. So it'll vary by retailer and supplier, but it tracks it all the way through. And we're tracking on the order of 250,000 lots a week. And because of the food safety laws, we are leaving the information in the blockchain, and the associated information like that certificate of registration or certificate of organic authority in the case of like the state of California, that auxiliary information sits in an off-blockchain data store for 2 years, because that's what the FDA guidance is at this point. Every blockchain solution will work within the regulatory guidance of how long data has to be kept. So in the case of pharmaceuticals, right now it looks like that is 40 years, or 2 people's active lifetimes. That's how the FDA defines it today. So it's going to differ by industry. We talked a little bit about this, and networks. What I wanted to talk about were 3 different use cases in terms of customer engagement. One of them is consumer loyalty programs. So here what we're talking about is every grocery store chain, every retailer has a loyalty program. They do not have the concept of interoperability across the loyalty program, or giving the ability of a consumer to essentially play their loyalty points across all the members. You have some credit card companies that are allowing this for either their private label credit cards or their public branded level programs. Capital One is a major driver in this area, primarily in the travel and transportation area, travel and leisure. But we're seeing the same thing start to apply in other areas of retail. We see in Asia several major retail chains who are starting to look at the concept of can we pull our points together and offer our mutual consumer across complementary retail segments more opportunity to shop within our collection of stores. So if one's a specialty clothing retailer, another one's shoes, one's camping gear, one's restaurants, they really don't compete with each other, but they have a common consumer. Let's make that common consumer want to shop more in our collection of stores than in someone else's collection of stores. They're doing this, quite frankly, to compete against Alibaba. The next area is something that's come out of financial services called Know Your Customer. So in financial services, this is an effort to stop money laundering, to where banks have to know who the customer is, transactions, all of that. It's also to drive lifetime spend, being able to understand how valuable that family is as opposed to an individual member in the family. Well, we look at it, one other area is warranty management, in that, especially for high-ticket items and for high-ticket consumer electronics, there is a warranty. With that warranty, a lot of times that warranty goes through a third party, meaning the manufacturer goes to a distributor and finally ends up at the retailer sells it, the manufacturer, until the warranty card is registered, doesn't know who bought it. This is the concept of getting rid of the warranty card. That if the manufacturer, the distributor, the retailer all see that history of that product and how it was sold and when it was sold and who bought it, you have the ability to know whether or not the warranty is still valid or not, has the warranty been broken, etc. So it's Know Your Customer for warranty. The other one is an offshoot of what we've done with Food Trust, product provenance or food provenance. And this addresses something that's coming up more and more around the world. It's primarily being driven by a little bit in Gen X, primarily millennials. It'll be more in Gen Z. And what is driving it is, where did my food come from? How do I know what you're selling is what you say it is? We saw it in Asia with the whole powdered milk crisis, where counterfeiters were actually going to garbage dumps, getting old Nestle and Unilever empty cans of baby formula, powdered baby formula, filling it with a little bit of powdered milk and the rest with powdered gypsum, resealing the container and selling it. Every container has a serial number. Imagine if they had tracked it and given the ability to scan that container and the consumer could say, wait a second, that was manufactured 2 years ago and it said it was already expired. How am I buying it new? It would have stopped the fraud. We see the same thing in terms of fresh food product. And in fact, this is something that Carrefour has enabled for consumers in Europe for their chicken products. So if you buy chicken in a Carrefour store, they have the ability that if you scan the QR code, you see where the product, how the animal was raised. In this case, 70% feed was cereal, supplemental feed was 50% corn, where it was packaged, or the slaughterhouse, and then when it showed up at the store. So when and where it was harvested, when and where it was packaged, when and where it showed up at the store. So you now see how your product got to you. Carrefour is doing this in Europe. They did this. They implemented this solution on their own over the past year. They have since joined Food Trust. So this is a Know Your Food. In the United States, we expect to see this With berries, Driscoll's is working on something over in the berry end to be able to show the same thing. We also see the same thing happening with cattlemen's associations. So in Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, the cattlemen's associations are actually putting the cattle ear tags on the blockchain, along with the entire growth history and the entire breeding history. Eventually, what they want to be able to do is that when you scan the QR code of that package of grass-fed beef from Montana in a store, you will see what ranch it came from, how the animal was raised, how the product was handled before you got to it. So, in terms of getting started, one of the things that we've seen is 70% of executives in retail are saying that they're going to do something with the next 3 years. I don't personally trust those numbers because I've talked with a lot of retailers and consumer product companies, and I think a lot of it is wishful thinking. I think what they really need to understand is what is the friction point within the business process that they're looking at, and what do they want to resolve. In the case of Know Your Customer, what's the business value of being able to show what that customer wants to see? Is it important? If I'm De Beers and I'm putting serial numbers on every diamond, it's really easy. I want the diamond consumer to trust that they're getting a non-conflict gemstone and I'm complying with the law. If I'm somebody like Brooklyn Roasters in New York City, I want my consumer to know that they're getting fair trade coffee, and I'm giving them the opportunity to send the tip via private currency to the grower who actually raised the coffee that I am serving them in the store. So what are you trying to accomplish as a business defines what you need to go after, not simply saying, I need a blockchain project because everyone's doing a blockchain project. So with that, we'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis and Rose. Are there any questions specific to this presentation? Karen, do you have a microphone? Or? Oh.
I spoke with. Can you hear? Yeah. Oh, okay. I spoke with Azim about food trust. He said when I talked to him about putting the barcode on the label where they could see where the product came from and all that, he was like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting idea. We're looking at releasing food trust soon. I'm really busy. I don't have time to talk about it right now, but it looked like with your car, for example, is that now going to be a standard thing?
So there are two issues. Carrefour built that themselves, so the data was in the blockchain. They made the decision to build the consumer application themselves to be able to show that information to a consumer. We're working on what I'll call a white label generic consumer app. But quite frankly, every retailer or every manufacturer is going to have to define for themselves what they want to see and how they want to make it visible. The data's there. The question is, what can you expose? What do you want to expose? And given the governance rules of you and your supply chain partners, what information does the rest of your supply chain agree that you can expose? Because you might have a grower who says, I don't want anybody to know where my farm is. You may have a distributor who says the identity of individual growers is a trade secret. So you need to work through that business governance model to figure that out.
In the back.
So I'm just going to pull it back to Dean's comments earlier about what's the quote was, fantastic ideas get stuck and institutional versus stifling innovation. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't seem, in your projection or as you're kind of seeing things going as you're developing this particular platform, you know, unless Walmart decides that every single person that they're going to buy something has to be able to subscribe to a blockchain, it's not like Walgreens or Joe's Market or Trader Joe's is going to, which is really the market of the people that are really interested in looking at that kind of stuff. Trader Joe's isn't going to be able to influence making everybody do that. So what kind of timeline or what kind of transition are we seeing this kind of stuff happening in? Because
so I'll give you, so Food Trust from incubation to GA was 22 months.
that's the technology. Again,
That-
brilliant
the
idea,
application.
full adoption in the industry.
So in your average grocery store, if we keep this at fresh items, okay, and let's leave Trader Joe's out of this because it's a little bit different. It's not a full-service grocery store. So if you say your average Kroger, Walmart, Neighborhood Market, whatever, you have 10,000 fresh items. That translates to about 75,000 suppliers. So you tackle it category by category, which is what Walmart is doing. They tackled it first by saying, okay, we're going to do essentially early production in 4 pain points. And they did those. They said, hey, that works, great. We've done all the SKUs in those 4 pain points. Berries, tomatoes, some other imported mangoes. Okay, great. Now let's all do leafy greens. Why leafy greens? Because of the last 2 romaine fiascos.
So I get the transition, but I guess my question is
How long is it going to take?
and how does the industry kind of move? Because basically what it sounds like is everybody has to wait behind the largest guy.
No.
800-pound gorilla to make it happen.
No. There are 12 retailers and 12 manufacturers that are sitting in Food Trust. Okay? Each of those can drive their own supply chain differently. So in the case of one of the food manufacturers that manufactures baby food, it has driven its entire supply chain on from the start. Okay? Because that was what they needed to be able to address their market.
Sure.
In the case of Walmart, they're doing it category by category. In the case of Carrefour, they're doing it a different set of categories by geography. So everyone's going to be different.
So every industry or category of retailer, it's the 800-pound gorilla in that category of retailer, as opposed to,
No.
you know,
It's who,
malls.
Anyone can join it.
anyone can join and anyone can drive it.
If I may, for me, the power beyond waiting for the gorilla, the reason you want the standard is so if you can gain sufficient agreement amongst 40, 20-pounders, you've got a game.
Yeah.
That's what the blockchain does, is it allows an aggregation of that intent.
So
If you get an 800-pound gorilla.
So
that
an example of that is there are 4 cooperatives in the Midwest that provide essentially high quality, I'll call it artisanal vegetables. Walmart is a minor retailer for them. Their major retailers happen to be in mid-tier local retail. Okay, in the middle part of the country. The 4 of them banded together and drove their 6 retailers to join. Because what they said is, with this, we will be able to guarantee you X and Y and Z, and we built the application to show where the tomatoes came
I
from.
mean, I can totally see the way that suppliers would do this for the Carrefour example, right? Which is, by the time the package hits your dock, it's got the QR code that tracks it all the way back to the end. Don't care who bought it, right? The seller component of it is irrelevant. It came into this store, but at the end of the day, all I have to do is scan the QR code on my chicken or my lettuce, prepared lettuce salad thing or whatever, and it will go all the way back to farm. I can totally see it driven from that side. I was just thinking more about like how retailers would drive this, or how, you know, the 6 or 7 mid-market or small market grocers could actually drive this all the way back to the end. That's more of the question.